Hello, welcome back, everybody, to the Michael SIsco show. We have back returning to the program the infamous Jim Jatras. So, welcome back, Jim.
I think it's the notorious JGJ is the official moniker. It's thank you, Michael. So glad to be back, and it's a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, thank you. We know that this is really just a warm up for you to go on a much bigger deal later, which is
But maybe still around. I'll shed all the good stuff here, and we'll just have leftovers later on.
I doubt it. So, you are going on Jay Dyer's show at what, 7 o'clock, right?
8 o'clock, I think. Yes,
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock Eastern time. Yeah.
Okay. What are you guys talking about?
Stuff, the world, the universe, politics, what's going on in foreign policy, what we have to fear, what we can hope for, the usual.
Same stuff we're talking about?
It's similar. I think there'll be some overlap. Hey, look, let's be clear, Michael. The issues of the day are pretty obvious to most people. I've seen some discussion groups that they're talking about some fairly obscure historical topics that might be of interest in and of themselves. But right now, we're living in a crisis, and I think a little focus would be in order.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a lot of good news today. I don't know if you've been paying attention the last couple of hours.
Yeah, about the Pennsylvania decision.
Yeah, there's that, which is basically the ballots where the voters failed to provide ID by November 9th. They will not be counted. Michigan legislator has requested a full audit.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Georgia is doing the recount, which is yesterday's news. And I'm hearing rumors of forensics, some headway with forensics with the Dominion software. So that's just rumors that I've heard.
Well, Trump has been on a tear today about all of this stuff. I mean, he was sort of quiet last few days, and now he's been on a Twitter rant. I'm sure with warnings galore, which tells you it's really good stuff. I'm beginning to enjoy the Twitter warnings. It's sort of like sorting out which is the really reliable and good stuff versus the stuff that you can dismiss.
That's true. Did you see that they banned the official Twitter account for ICE?
What? No, I did not see that.
Yeah, that's within the last hour.
I mean, that's 2 hours. I mean, look, shameless doesn't even begin to describe these people, and that's a whole other topic we can get to. Is if there is some possibility of some remedial action, I get a little tired of some of these people who are talking about the current election. Well, even if we fail, we still have to reform our electoral process. At that point, I don't really care about our electoral process. I mean, that means the people writing the rules will not be reforming except in a bad way. So if any talk about ballot security and the rest of that, forget it. It's going to be Katie bar the door at that point.
That's true. So are you optimistic? What's your take on the election and the prospects for Trump, where we stand now?
Well, a friend of mine told me today he'd gotten an email from a friend of his that he was 100% confident Trump would come out on top, and I said I agreed with that totally, except mine is 75%. I was down to about 5 to 10% chance that he might pull out of this. I'm up to maybe 20-25%. Here's the problem: I have no difficulty believing as a moral certainty that the election was stolen in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, possibly Arizona. But I don't. I'm confident the evidence is probably there. The question is, will they get the opportunity to make the showing of the evidence? Given that to get injunctive relief in a court, you have to have the evidence up front. It's not like when you normally make a civil complaint and the court regards as true your allegations as a matter of law, and then you get to prove it in court. You've got to come up with the evidence up front. And how do you do that when the other side is obviously sitting on the evidence, hiding the evidence, destroying evidence, and trying to rush through a certification of the election to make the whole question moot before you can actually get to proving your case? So there's that problem. The other bigger problem, in my opinion, is that you have to rely on human beings, namely judges and GOP politicians, that are not particularly reliable. Now, I do have some hope in the Pennsylvania case. I'm trying to get a read on that, how much Justice Alito's nose has been out of joint over the way the Pennsylvania executive authorities, who are Democrats, have not obeyed the earlier order regarding the segregation of votes and how to count them and so forth, whether that's going to turn around. But I think a lot of people are maybe taking undue comfort from the fact that now that notorious ACB is on the court, that that's all going to turn around on a 5-4 decision. That my fear is that when the Democrats put somebody on a court, they get a naked partisan. That's what they want, and that's what they got. Whereas when the Republicans put a strict constructionist who will call the balls and strikes in a neutral manner on the court, fortunately for the law, but unfortunately for the results, that's what we get. So I'm not entirely sure that even the most offended Kavanaugh or ACB or whoever else may come out on the right side if they actually see the law in a way that is not favorable to our side, especially since one of the hallmarks of judicial restraint is deferring to the political branches of government, unless you have overwhelming reason not to. The question is, can the Trump people present overwhelming evidence up front, at least sufficient for the court to say that it would cause irreparable harm to the one side in a dispute to allow the election to be certified without hearing a fuller hearing of their evidence. It seems to me that should be a fairly easy call to make, to say, fine, we will hold up the certification of the process until there's a fuller ability to present the evidence and us to make a judgment. What I expect the courts to do in all likelihood is not invalidate any elections or a rerun, although that's possible. I would think it's more likely they would simply say that certain categories of ballots in this or that state will or will not be counted. And then we'll see how that affects the outcome. That's what I expect there. Then on the other question about that Trump's really got it in the state legislatures, because like, for example, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, you have Democrats in the executive branch, but Republicans running in the legislature, and the Constitution, as I've been banging the drum on, the Constitution gives that authority to the legislature. I don't know how much these Republican politicians are going to stick their necks out to actually take hold of the electoral process, which, to my mind, they have a constitutional right to do. In other words, it requires courage and political will, which, as you know, among Republicans tend to be in rather short supply.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, adjusting my green screen.
It looks good to me. And of course, then the last thing, by the way, would be if somehow there is not a majority in the Electoral College on December 14th, and the whole thing gets thrown into the House of Reprehensibles, what happens then? And I don't think anybody quite knows that either. They say, well, there are more Republican majority delegations than Democrat ones. I haven't looked to see how much of a mismatch there may be in some cases between which party has the majority in the congressional delegation and which party won the election in that state during the election we just had and is still ongoing. In other words, if you have a Republican majority on a congressional delegation, but the state voted for Biden, they're going to be under an awful lot of pressure to cast their votes for Biden, even though there's a Republican majority. I think it would be less true in a state that was the other way around. I don't know how many states like that there are. Maybe there are none, and maybe it will be a straight delegation majority vote. But I don't know that if we get to that, which I don't think we will.
Yeah, you don't think Clarence Thomas might be a little biased, making a decision on Joe Biden?
I hope so. That's the thing. I mean, I'm not averse to a little bias now and then if it goes the right way, but I'm not necessarily counting on it.
Yeah, so I think a lot of our viewers might be a little younger. Could you maybe rehash the whole why Clarence Thomas might be a wild card that does not go in Biden's favor?
Everybody doesn't remember unless you're got an old long gray beard, and you're really old. Back when I don't even remember what year that was when Thomas. In fact, I should know because when I was still working at the Senate, then I was part of the team that was pushing his nomination through the confirmation process. Working with the White House, and we were putting out like hourly bulletins on how things are going. Everybody knows that the real the beer and rape allegation against Kavanaugh back in those times was Anita Hill, a law professor, saying that she was the target of unwanted sexual advances from Clarence Thomas, and this became basically. Actually, this was believe all women back long before the Me Too movement ever began. And what was clearly at stake here was the fact that Clarence Thomas was black, and that the idea that, as sort of the equivalent of Joe Biden saying to whoever that was on the TV, well, if you're not voting for Biden, then you ain't black. I mean, that obviously somebody who's black does not have a right to have an opinion that departs from the party line or the racial line that has been established. And Clarence Thomas is an independent thinker. That's heresy. That's not allowed. So he was, I think, targeted by one of the first media circuses. Actually, the first one was Judge Bork a few years before that. In fact, that even became a verb, to bork someone. And Clarence Thomas was borked, but he managed to survive it. And of course, Joe Biden was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee at the time. So he was the one running the circus and trying to, in fact, Justice Thomas himself called it a lynching, a high-tech lynching. And he managed to survive that.
Yeah, well, I hope that it does come to the Supreme Court and that Clarence Thomas writes the majority opinion and it just says simply, "Screw you, Joe Biden." That would be epic. Absolutely epic.
Epic, there we
go. George Giordano says, I was wondering if you could speak a bit about what's now being called Sharpie Gate. Does the type of pin used to fill out a ballot matter or invalidate a ballot? I think that's something like that happened in Arizona, right?
That's what they say. And I don't know any more probably than the questioner knows, that I've seen the reports saying that the polling officials themselves gave the people the Sharpies to fill it out with, and that supposedly the Sharpies then will bleed through the ballot and make it invalid, and that other people are claiming that that's not so, that the Sharpies can be used as well as any other pen. So the short answer to that is I don't know any more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think that was already taken to the courts and it was like tossed out immediately. So I don't know. I think the Dominion software probably will make the difference in Arizona, if anything.
Well, the other thing that in terms of software and all that everybody's talking about is this what they call the hammer and scorecard thing, about this supposedly a very sophisticated program hatched by the intelligence agencies that was designed apparently for some kind of counterterrorism use, and that's a whole other topic I'm quite skeptical about, but also has been used to manipulate foreign elections in the past. And it's a very sophisticated program. Kirk Wiebe on a broadcast a couple of days ago described how this works. Essentially, you can shave vote by vote, just flip them as they're coming through the electronic transmission in a way that really is not detectable from the outside, because it's not like remember the movie Office Space, where they had the program to skim money off from the little percentages going through the bank's transactions, to take off a little 1/10% here, nobody will notice, but then the guy got the decimal point wrong, so instead of $30 or $3 showing up, they got $3,000, $30,000 showing up. They're going to notice that, and so this thing doesn't do that. What it does is it can only operate apparently under like a 3% threshold. So you're taking small numbers of votes here and here, but doing it consistently all along the way in a way that will show an upward trend in the votes. I don't know if any of this is true. This is the allegation I've heard. I don't know if any of it's true. I've asked somebody with a CIA background that I know that if it is true, hey, is there any substance to it? And if it is, does it make any sense that the DNC would have access to this technology, and more likely that the intelligence agencies themselves would be the ones operating the program to this effect? Because as we know, the resistance to Trump, even before he took office, was centered in the intelligence agencies, in the CIA, in the NSA, in the FBI, and the other, what is called the deep state. And I don't think it's entirely impossible. In fact, I think it's. I would say it's likely, but I would say it's certainly within the realm of possibility that this was an operation done from those agencies. But I don't know.
It just fascinates me that How does the CIA does the intelligence community feel like they have is this a sense of duty that they feel to protect the republic, their opposition to Trump, or is it really just because are they really the swamp? Is Trump really such a threat to their
Yeah, yes, all of those things. I mean, I think you saw this on display during the impeachment hearings when you had all these witnesses. You had who was it, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. You had Ambassador Maria Jovanovic, the U.S. ambassador from in Ukraine. You had who was the one with the British accent? She was entirely obnoxious. She looked a little bit like Voldemort. I'm trying to remember her name. Anyway, all of them took it as a given that if the president is not agreeing with the interagency consensus, that somehow he's doing something wrong. There's an interagency consensus on policy toward Russia and Ukraine and this, that, the other thing, and the president was thwarting that consensus. But when I look at the Constitution, it says the executive power of the United States is vested in a president of the United States, not in an interagency consensus. They work for him. He doesn't work for them. But I think that mindset of kind of a hive of a bureaucratic patrimony of an establishment that actually believes they are the custodian of the national interest that is based on a consensus and an inertia of what has been the case for however many years, and that if anybody doesn't agree with that, he is literally threatening the United States and its national survival. I think they actually believe all this stuff. And for example, where did I see somewhere that there was somebody saying that if Trump gets elected again, it was Christiane Amanpour, you can take that to the bank, and maybe Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, saying that if Trump were elected again, he might actually take us out of NATO. It would end of the world. And of course, he should have done that in his first week in office, which he could do with a stroke of a pen. I don't know if anybody ever told him that he can take us out of NATO with a stroke of a pen. He should have. And of course, I think he thought he could sort of massage the swamp, put people in, like somebody like John Bolton, say, who doesn't agree with him on anything. In fact, virtually everybody he's appointed doesn't agree with him on anything. The only exception I can think of was just the last day or so. Lieutenant Colonel Doug McGregor got appointed as apparently some kind of special office in the Pentagon. I don't know how much authority, supposedly, to really get cracking on getting us out of Afghanistan and Syria. And I hope he does that because I followed Colonel McGregor's work, and he says a lot of very, very sensible things, and things that actually agree with Donald Trump, which is a big exception in this administration, because he has a habit of appointing all these people from the Heritage Foundation, Bush retreads recommended by the RNC, and people basically who have a record of implementing the very policies he denounced in 2016. That's why, Mike, look, as much as I want Trump to win here, and I think it'll be an absolute catastrophe for America and the world if Biden does take office, or rather, I should say, if Kamala Harris becomes our new president, that I don't know how much we can really expect things to change for the better. Because for one thing, if he does win, you think things were going to blow up if he had won clean on election day. Just think what the blow up will be like when they've been telling us for weeks that Joe Biden is the president-elect, and then defeat is snatched out from the jaws of victory by their side, and then they will be sure that Trump's the unprecedented riots and street violence which will be essentially of a pedagogical nature against. You thought there was a questioning of his legitimacy in the first term, and then the opposition to him, I think, will just be absolutely massive. Will he make any better decisions in terms of his selection of personnel and use of executive authority than he did during the first term? I hope so, but I have no assurance that he would do so.
Yeah. Well, my hope is that maybe throughout this process of uncertainty and people turning on him, their true colors being shown, that maybe we will get scorched earth Trump that just does everything that he needs to do. That's my hope anyway.
Well, I was said. Uh, oh, hi, Peter and Ellen. Helen, good to hear from you. It's what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought saying hello to
My bad. My bad.
yeah. It's that he will see their true colors. I was going somewhere with a thought. I'm sure it'll come back to me. Remember, I'm old. I get a little forgetful sometimes.
It's okay. Matthew Johnston asks, "What is the significance of Trump sacking the Secretary of Defense and reshuffling the Pentagon this close to Inauguration Day?"
I will tell you, but I just remember what I was going to say. So remember the name Octavian. I don't know what it means necessarily. I've asked people who should know. It may be as simple as a fit of pique that Esper was. Remember that whole little incident when Trump walked over to the church near the White House, the one had been attacked by the mob, and he had a show of having military officers with him, and apparently Esper thought that was inappropriate, and Trump took some offense at that. So it may be something as simple as that. Esper bristles at the notion that he's Jesper, that he's a yes man, and he claims he's spoken back to the president more than anybody has. If that's true, maybe the president doesn't like that very much. So there could be a couple of reasons for that. I don't know anything about this new guy, Miller, who is the acting over there. Apparently, Colonel McGregor is supposed to be an advisor to him. I don't know what this really means in terms of the conduct of business of the Pentagon. I mean, there's no place swampier than the Pentagon. So I don't know that firing the Secretary of Defense necessarily makes a big difference there. But frankly, there are a lot of people should be. There's a rumor that Gina Haspel, Bloody Gina, may get fired too at some point over at the CIA. That would be good, but who would replace her? Would be anybody better? I don't know. But back what you were saying earlier, Mike, is will Trump really show a different kind of resolve as an executive leader? I said in a piece I wrote a few years ago called Mikhail Octavian Trump. That would Trump be an Octavian? Would he restore the republic in a let's say a radical way, the way Octavian restored the republic in the Roman Empire, which really meant realizing that the historic constitution of the state no longer existed and hadn't existed for years, and essentially trashing what needed to be trashed, saving what could be saved, and moving on in a new form. That would be extremely difficult to do. Or would he end up being a Gorbachev? Would he end up trying to save what was left of the republic, in Gorbachev's case, the Soviet Union, and really simply accelerating all of the trends that were dragging the state down? Now, my fear is that it's not 1990 and 91. It's 1917 that Trump really ends up as Kerensky, and we have these rainbow Bolsheviks taking over in what is a coup. Remember, the Bolsheviks seized power in a coup as well, and in fact, they seized power on the 20. Let me get this straight now. The 26th of October on the old calendar, which was November 7th on the new calendar, which is the day that the media anointed Biden as the president-elect. So I'm sure that has no significance whatsoever.
Wow. That's insane. That did not dawn on me. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess we can. Hey, George, I don't know if I want to get into oil, but I guess we could. That's a good segue into what we had planned.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about foreign policy, but maybe that can have some overlap. But anyways, what do you see as, let's say that we do move forward with Joe Biden, which I personally don't think is going to happen, but that may just be me being optimistic. But what would be the most glaring foreign policy difference that we would see in a Biden administration?
Well, let's put this in light of the Trump administration, that there was not the radical break with the previous administration's policies. And he really did not do much to move forward with the the themes he outlined in 2016: getting along with Russia, getting along with China. Of course, now he's made thumping China one of his main foreign policy platforms. Getting out of Afghanistan, getting out of Syria, getting out. None of that happened, right? Did he have a more, let's say, assertive, or I don't even know how to call it, because it really wasn't America first. I mean, for example, on NATO, if you're going to really pursue America first, you'd say, fine, get out of NATO. Let's put America first, defend our own country. What are we doing with all these dependencies and hangers on that actually mean nothing to us and do not contribute to our security? Instead, that's somehow morphed into make NATO great again, make the satellites pay their share for their defense against nobody in particular, and let's hype the Russian threat. I mean, so that a lot of that got hijacked. But I think what you saw consistently during the Trump administration, and hopefully just the first term of his administration, was the president having a moral center of gravity, wanting to push back against all the swamp critters that he surrounded himself with. You know, all the adults in the room, as McMaster and Mattis and all those people like to call themselves. And that he was something they had to overcome at every step. At least he did not start any new wars. And that's a pretty low bar to clear, but it's something to thank God for, right? Because we haven't seen that in several administrations. Reportedly, we were within 10 minutes of launching an attack on Iran when they shot down that drone. That was only supposedly a personal phone call from Tucker Carlson to the president that caused him to call off that attack. So if that's true, that's something to thank God for. The worst thing about the Harris-Biden administration, I'm put in that order for a reason, is that it will be staffed entirely by crazed warmongers like Michelle Flournoy and Susan Rice and Samantha Power. A lot of them are women, by the way. That's scary. Anne-Marie Slaughter, great name there. And plus some of the boys like Tony Blinken and who was the other one? Dick Burns, a few of the others. And these guys make Mike Pompeo look like Gandhi. I mean, these guys are really reckless warmongers. Any pretense of improving ties with Russia will be out the window. Biden has already signaled, will be the number one threat that we have to confront. So I think when you look at Syria, you look at Ukraine, Belarus, the North, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the Arctic, we will be pressing them on every front. And I think there's a reason that Putin showcased the opening of that new nuclear command center, which they were building anyway, of course. But I think he's making it very clear to the Biden people that we're ready for whatever you throw at us. So that's something to be greatly worried about. Now, some people say, well, do you think he'll get back into the Iran nuclear agreement? Or do you think he'll pull back from some of the confrontation with China? I don't think so. I know that Pepe Escobar has suggested those would be two possibly bright spots in a Biden administration. I agree with I think he's a German, the analyst at Moon of Alabama, which is a really great site. Not pro-Trump in any way, but certainly pointing out some of the pluses and minuses that we're looking at here. And he doesn't think either of those will happen. First off, if Biden does take office, he'll have all the Europeans eating out of his hand. I mean, they were the first to rush to congratulate him. And when I say the Europeans, I mean the bad ones. Boris Johnson, Macron, especially Angela Merkel, the worst. And that means that people like Orban or the conservative government in Poland and so forth, they'll be the bad guys. So I think that they will be so eager to get back on board with the Americans, they will then turn around and put additional demands on the Iranians to get back into the nuclear deal. Remember, these are countries that, even with the United States withdrawal, have not kept up their obligations under the nuclear deal, which, by the way, I think was a flawed deal. But I disagree with Barack Obama when he says a no deal is better than a bad deal. I disagree. Most of the time in this world, a bad deal is better than no deal, because no deal sometimes means war. And rather than, who has it said, there's never has been a good war or a bad peace. I'd rather have a bad deal that keeps the peace than a good deal that foments war. And I think that possibility will become very real again under a Biden administration, and for that matter, unfortunately, under a Trump administration. As far as China goes, a lot of people saying Joe is compromised, that, Hunter and all that money and all that. Since if Biden wins, none of those things will ever be investigated. I think he has nothing to fear. And I think, again, the deep state will push him for continuing confrontation with China. I don't expect any improvement there either.
Yeah. I just want to address this.
There you go. There you go.
Well, that's
Cheney
true.
and also Cindy McCain is on his. We've got John McCain's ghost. John McCain lies mouldering in the grave, but his ghost is marching on. Right.
That's crazy. Alex Y. You're not completely correct. We are not quite.
I think he is. I think he is actually.
I mean, I don't know. If you go, there's a website that I never go on called the Daily some sort of weather afterwards.
Rain, something with rain, I think.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and they have a ticker at the a clock, like countdown to when how long it'll be before white people are no longer the majority, and I don't think we're quite there, but there's an argument.
Let me express a bit of heresy from both sides of that question. I think it's let's say inappropriate and factually unfounded to look at these issues solely through the lens of race. That that when we look at I've tried to champion the notion that America is an ethnic state, not a civic state, and that there is an American ethnos that you may be related to by blood, even though I am not. And that involves more than just what your genetic ancestry is. Also involves your language, your religion, your customs, all of these things that make a nation different from another nation. I mean, race is not a nation. White is not a nation. There are white ethnic Englishmen, Germans, Frenchmen, Spaniards. There are yellow ethnic Korean, Japanese, Chinese. There are black ones, Yoruba, Xhosa, Zulus, and so forth. Just reduce that to broad genetic phenotypes, I think is a big mistake. But if you look at America that way, there has been a concerted offensive to demonize the historic American ethnos. That is to say, the original Anglo-American founders of this country, and then the various European immigrants have assimilated to that ethnos linguistically and in terms of their civic culture and so forth over the centuries, and make them first a political minority in our country and eventually an ethnic minority. And one way you do that is not only through immigration and having people who simply don't belong to that ethnos at all, but you also have people who define themselves not according to their historic origins as Americans, but rather to some other tribal identification as feminists or LGBT or climate change enthusiasts or whatever is a rejection of the historic Anglo-Protestant founding of this country. And that may very well be a majority now. Even though non-European heritage or non-Anglo linguistically may not yet be a minority, I think as a national ethos, that ethnos has already become a minority, because you have particularly women who will vote as feminists for the other team because they identify as a victim tribe, along with racial, sexual, and other linguistic and other victims of the historic American nation. So I think we already are a minority in that regard. I think that I would have said, even if Trump wins this time, he will be the last Republican president, unless something very, very drastic happens to change the demographic trends in the second term that did not happen in the first term.
Yeah. I mean, it could be mitigated, but
well, in other words, when it's mitigated, what that usually means is just slowed down, but not reversed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing you see historically over the last few decades. Every single Democratic president that served two terms, take it all the way back to FDR, I think, has changed the character of the country. Whereas the Republicans who served in the intermediate administrations didn't really change the character of the country. They were just sort of a plateau to the let's say march to the progressive side that resumed as soon as the next Democrat took office, and there never was any going back.
Yeah, that's true, and that's ultimately the major flaw of conservatism in America. We never conserve anything. We just slow down the push left. So.
That's right. And when somebody like Roger talks about soft totalitarianism as something that's coming in the future, I think he's right about that because this is all happening still under the Trump administration. And we've already got critical race theory and all of that stuff that's being shoved down everybody's throat at almost every walk of life. We got little kids being singled out, for their race and their sex and their, we've got the promotion of LGBT and transgenderism among little kids, drag queen story hour. All of this stuff is going on while Trump is in the White House. Can you imagine what happens when they have full control of the levers of power at the national level and will not ever give them back? That's the other thing, too. I think if Biden does come out on top, that there will be changes made to our electoral system that will just make it impossible for a Republican to win at the national level ever again, plus a thoroughgoing purge of anything that even whiffs of populism or Trumpism in the Republican Party.
Scary. Gulags in my future. That's what I see. Alex.
There you go, being a giddy optimist. You and your thirst for martyrdom.
That's my only chance for sainthood, honestly. It's to just be. That's why I'm a jerk. So that hopefully that they just let's kill this Orthodox dude.
Yeah, I'm not sure just getting murdered counts as martyrdom, but hey, it's worth a shot.
This is what you do. You say, hey, hang on a second. Can you pronounce that this is because of my faith that you're killing me? And then let me say my declaration of faith before you shoot me. Thanks, buddy. Thank you.
There you go. And I'll fly away.
Just kidding. Just kidding. I can't keep up with the questions, guys, but I saw somebody say, I don't read that website. I don't really care if you do. One morning I woke up and I got a text message saying, holy crap, there's an article about you on the DS.
Really?
And I went and that's the first time I was ever on the website, and I thought that it was hilarious. So it's an amusing site. Not that I'm pushing it, but we're all gonna be canceled soon anyways, so what's it matter?
Well, see, that's the other thing, Mike, that's going to happen is that, and this is the problem with so much of the, I don't know if it's any secret that there's supposed to be a big demonstration in Washington on Saturday, and I plan to be there. You plan to be there. Other people plan to be there. It's probably let's say, eventually a bad choice, but you only live once, right? And but of course, if you look at all the mega talk and all this is overwhelmingly a civic nationalist thing, make America great again, the Constitution, old-fashioned American patriotism, which that's great. That's where the center of gravity is for what's left of the American ethnos. And so you play the ball where it lies. Those are our people. You have to stand with them. At the end of the day, is that going to float the boat? And I don't know that it will, especially since from that civic mindset, they will be the first one to consume their own that are slightly to the right of them. In other words, when you say, "Oh, I'm MAGA, I'm for America, I'm for the Constitution," and they say, "Yeah, but that guy, he's a Nazi. Well, crush him. He deserves everything he gets." And then when is the next guy overturned? Well, yeah, but that guy's a Nazi. We'll crush him. And then when they get to you and you say, "But I'm not a Nazi," yeah, but all these guys say you are. So what happens to you then? And so I think that part of the advantage that the other side, I don't even like to call them the left, because I don't even know what you call them exactly. It's not really left and right in the conventional sense. One of the things the wokesters have to their advantage is that most of their dirty work will be carried out by people who supposedly on our side, who are simply eliminating Islami style, starting at whatever is the unacceptable right, and then cutting their way over till there's nobody to the right of, say, I don't know, who would be Charlie Kirk, I guess. Maybe he'll get Nazified too at some point.
Yeah, well, he moved kind of right lately.
Yeah.
Which is, good to see. Do I take him as sincere? I don't know. That's. But what I do like about this MAGA march, which, by the way, if you're watching, you have to come, no matter where you live in the U.S. If you live in Europe, we want you here too. Just cross the Canadian border, get to D.C. We want you at this march, but it does seem like all hands are on deck and everybody's getting along for it for the most part. That still supports Trump.
How is it supposed to work? It's supposed to assemble at Freedom Plaza. Freedom Plaza is not very big.
We'll fit.
I mean, why did they call it to meet on the mall?
Yeah, well, we're gonna march. So that's like that's why I'm getting there early, first of all, so that me and Mike, I'm bringing about 20 people, and we're getting there early so we can choose our spot. But then, I guess we'll fit around in the surrounding streets or in the corners until we start the actual march to the White House. We're just mobbing the street,
Well,
basically.
march to the White House. The Freedom Plaza was only a block from the White House. There's no way to march. I mean, it's right there.
I guess we're just mobbing. I guess it's
it's supposed to march to the Supreme Court.
Okay. I have to look at the details.
Like a straight shot up Pennsylvania Avenue.
Because I think the Million MAGA March people are meeting at the Supreme Court.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
Apparently, and what time are they supposed to meet?
That's at 12.
That's at 12. Okay, there's someplace else that they're meeting at 8 and someplace else at 9. And I think some of them are meeting at Freedom Plaza. So if you're up at the Supreme Court, you're going to march. Okay, so maybe we'll have two different marches going in opposite directions.
I guess.
That would be symbolic somehow.
That would be cool, actually. I mean, all I know is we're mobbing DC on Saturday, and we all need to do it. So,
and maybe if there's two MAGA marches going in opposite directions, they could clash with each other, and we wouldn't even need Antifa.
Well, maybe what we can do is flank so that we have Antifa in the middle, and then we just surround them.
Yeah,
and then that would be epic. That would be epic. So,
I suspect they won't come out. I mean, I think they're being told that the game plan is to simply ignore this. It didn't happen, and it's just like, oh yeah, there were a couple hundred people out there. Nothing to see here, folks. Let's move on.
Yeah, well, we will make sure that in the alt media that it gets out, and I think Newsmax and stuff will cover it, because even some of the anchors on Newsmax are actually talking about going. So
yeah, okay.
Which is and Lady MAGA is going to be there, so we know it's going to be a great success.
Wait, who's Lady MAGA? I don't know Lady MAGA.
I'm joking. It's a trainee. It's like a
oh right. Yes, I've heard
drag queen. Sorry to give you that image, but
yeah, well,
it is what it is. What do you? Somebody's been asking about Trump potentially starting a new party, or do you think we need a new party besides? So maybe that's the question. Do you think it's going forward? Is it more effective to use the Republican Party as a vehicle for nationalist populism, or just to start a new party?
No.
No to which one?
I don't think either one of those would be effective. If Trump loses, or rather, if the election is successfully stolen from him, national politics for the conservative side, right, whatever you want to call it, is essentially over. Remember, the Republicans and the Democrats control the marketplace of the parties with a very tight hand at the structure, both the state and the federal level. They've written themselves essentially into the law, so that it's virtually impossible to do to the Republican Party what everybody's been trying to do ever since the Republican Party was founded. How many third parties do we have in this country? Libertarians and social democrats and who knows this and that. Third parties lose. I mean, we got third parties out the wazoo in this country. The United States routinely criticizes other governments for not allowing new parties to get into the political system and compete successfully. We're the worst offender in that regard. I mean, in fact, when Ross Perot got into the debates, what year was that? I should remember this. Anyway, what that was with Ross Perot, they rewrote the debate law to make the threshold higher to make sure that would never happen again. And that's the thing that killed Pat Buchanan when he ran third party, because he expected to get on the stage with George Bush and Bill Clinton clean their clocks, which he would have. That's why they couldn't let him on the stage. They changed the threshold. There are little things like that in the election law throughout the country and at the state level. Unless the Republican Party completely disintegrates, there's simply no way to replace it. So, on the other hand, as I say, if Trump loses, I think there will be a total purge of Trumpism, at least at the national level and in many parts of the country at the state level. And as far as Trump himself, no, I don't think he has a future of any political or media or anything else. If he loses, he and his family need to leave the country and leave fast. Because you remember Lock Her Up from 2016? That didn't happen. That was never going to happen. Partly because A, Trump didn't control the apparatus of the government, and B, they would have been terrified at the thought that, oh, we're repressing our political enemies. It looks like a banana republic. Once we are fully a banana republic, which we will be if Biden wins, they will come after him and his family with a vengeance. There will be multiple state and federal indictments of him and his family for God knows what. You say, well, he hasn't done anything wrong. What country do you think you're living in? You think you have to do something wrong to be raked over the coals by the supposed law enforcement? Whatever happened to Flynn and Papadopoulos and what's his name, Roger Stone and the others? That's just a preview. That's just the appetizer. The kind of remember this? We've got this. What is it? The Robert Reich Truth Commission. You've got AOC asking for names. These some of the media are starting to drop lists of names. You can bet that this will be criminalized under the new regime, and that they will make sure that some very significant heads roll for having the temerity to support Orange Hitler.
Crazy. So I know that there's been some updates in the Ukraine situation, and I have not been really paying attention. Could you fill us in on what's going on in Ukraine, and does that have anything to do with Biden?
I'm not sure it has much to do with Biden. Well, it does in a sense, because and I hate to say this, and let me just say it from the outset, I don't like to criticize bishops privately, but even in public, to say, because I know a lot of people will look at what's going on in the Greek Archdiocese or the Ecumenical Patriarchate and say, they're heretics, they're secret Roman Catholics, they're this and that and the other thing. Look, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what's going on in somebody's heart. I know they sometimes make statements publicly that could be seen as doctrinally unsound, to say the least, possibly even heretical. I'm not going to sit in judgment of what a bishop says and does as a bishop, because I'm just a layman. On the other hand, I can describe what people do and say and allow people to make their own judgment as to what is going on here. It's public record. If you look at Hellenoscope, Nick Stamatakis writes this, that it's pretty clear that there's a very, very cozy relationship between the Greek Archdiocese. And when I say that, I don't know if it's Archbishop of Athens personally, or whether it's some of every one of these dioceses have their little bureaucrats that sort of run the place, and they have a very close relationship with both Joe Biden and Andrew Cuomo. I mean, New York is kind of a nest of corruption. And it's sad to say, but it is. And that, of course, relates to things like the mess that happened over the St. Nicholas Shrine and Ground Zero and all this other sort of stuff. So you do have these personal relationships and political relationships. You also have the fact that the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Constantinople or Istanbul is very, some people would even say it's simply a puppet of the State Department, or at least very much influenced by the State Department. And that goes back to the late 1940s, when Patriarch Athanagoras was installed by the Truman administration. Now, at the time, that was considered a Cold War thing. There was a previous patriarch who was considered too pro-Moscow. Of course, the Moscow Patriarchy was under the authority of the communist Soviet government. So you can understand why they would have taken that position. But the bottom line is that the State Department and has a very strong influence over what goes on in the Greek Archdiocese and with the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And they see that, I would say, in a very cynically and unchristian, unspiritual way, as simply a geopolitical tool. They look at Russia as the main enemy. What's the word I want? The bedrock of Russia's society, of its political order now, post-communism. It's the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church. How do you strike at the Russians? How do you weaken their soft power? Well, you try to weaken and break up the Orthodox Church. And one way to do that, and one of the real points of vulnerability that was identified, was Ukraine. That, obviously there's a lot of turmoil in Ukraine. There has been for really ever since Ukraine became a separate state in 1991. And there are very strong divisions within Ukraine between what Ukrainians think Ukraine is. Who is Ukraine? Who are Ukrainians? Are they kind of like Russians, or very close to Russians, or as they were considered by many people before the revolution, simply were Russians? Or on the other hand, Are they, in the same way that Bavarians and Prussians are both Germans, right? Or are they not only a different country, but one that's very anti-Russian because the Russians are historic oppressors, et cetera, et cetera. So you have these views within Ukraine, and I think very effectively, the State Department, not only through the coup that took place in 2014, but in fact the earlier one that took place in 2004 and 2005, have seen this as a prime vulnerability of Russia strategically to break the political ties between Ukraine and Russia and to make Ukraine essentially a NATO base against Russia, which is a huge vulnerability for Russia. But the other way to look at it is, okay, in addition to that political division, can we sow spiritual discord? Can we sow discord within the church by recognizing as an autocephalous, and again, this is a lot of inside baseball for those who are not Orthodox, but as a completely self-ruling church, a group of schismatics in Ukraine that were not considered canonical by anybody prior to this latest mess starting in 2000. I guess it started in 2018, as the ecumenical patriarch really indicated he was going to move forward on this. And what this resulted in is there already had been a schism inside Ukraine between the canonical church, which is a self-ruling or autonomous part of the Russian Orthodox Church, or these other groups that were not recognized by anybody, but now have been awarded a tomos from Constantinople, kind of a decree, recognize them as an autocephalous church. And now the State Department is going around twisting arms of the various national churches within Orthodoxy to recognize this fake church in Ukraine. And unfortunately, this ties into another thing that has been the bane of our existence, and that's ethnic passions. That unfortunately some Greeks will see this as Greeks against Russians or Greeks against Slavs in support of our patriarch, the leader of 300 million Orthodox Christians, as some kind of an Eastern Pope, which of course he's not. And of course, if you disagree with this, especially if you're of Greek origin like I am, or like George Nikolopoulos at Monomachos, or Nixtamatakis, good Russian names there, right? All those names who are looking at this and saying, look, Constantinople is wrong. That to start with, the ecumenical patriarch is not an Eastern Pope. He has no authority outside of his own autocephalous church, which is really almost non-existent. I mean, a few hundred Greeks in Constantinople is the only real flock that he has. The rest of what he has, like the Americas, Australia, and a few other places, some parishes in Western Europe, some of which have broken away from him, Finland, places like this, are his only by virtue of the fact that he has historically been the first among equals, the remnant of the patriarchate of the imperial capital, which it hasn't been, of course, in centuries. So I guess the bottom line, I know this is very confusing for some viewers, but the bottom line is that it would be as though Washington had in its target some very important Roman Catholic country, and they said, all right, let's just sow discord in the Roman Catholic Church. Let's support this cardinal or that cardinal against these other cardinals or against the Pope, and create a crisis in the Roman Catholic Church so they'll be confused and divided and at enmity with one another. But that's sort of what they're doing now with the Orthodox Church. Not that the underlying divisions aren't there to some extent, but they've clearly been exploited and exacerbated by the State Department, and I'm sorry to say by Mike Pompeo personally. Also, the one you keep in mind is Jeffrey Pyatt, who's the U.S. ambassador in Athens right now, who had been U.S. ambassador in Kiev in Ukraine at the time of the Maidan coup in 2014. So this guy, has, let's say he's got experience with this sort of thing. Now, so far, besides Constantinople, they've got the Archbishop of Athens, the head of the autocephalous Greek Church, which is not truly independent of Constantinople, to recognize the fake Ukrainian church. Although a lot of the bishops in Greece have said absolutely they do not recognize it, they have no part of it. You've had the same thing in Alexandria, the African church, where the patriarchate has recognized them, patriarch has recognized them. And that was a very sad development, because he had a very strong relationship to the canonical Ukrainian church, especially in Odessa. And then you had recently Archbishop Christosomos of Cyprus saying he recognized Ukrainian schismatics, which provoked a very sharp response for many of his bishops. Right now, the pressure seems to be really targeting Patriarch Theophilus, the Patriarch of Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem has a very, very venerable place in the Orthodox world. It's really the mother church of all of Christendom. And Patriarch Theophilus, who I've met on a couple of occasions, is a very good man, a very brave man, but he's going to be pressured very hard by the American government, by the Greek government, possibly by the Israeli government, because remember, the Israeli and the Greek and the Cypriot governments now are all strategic allies in the Eastern Mediterranean against Turkey, and also appeal to ethnic solidarity. I don't know if he can hold out. I hope that he can. Like I said, I don't want to judge another bishop if he is weak and then they hurt him. I don't think Patriarch Theophilus is weak. And the only other thing I would add on this is that Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople recently visited President Zelensky of Ukraine. Now, if you remember, the previous president, Poroshenko, Pyotr Poroshenko, was the one who pushed very hard for this fake Ukrainian autocephalous church because he thought there would be a feather in his cap for his reelection, which he lost resoundingly to Zelensky. Now, Zelensky, being Jewish, was, I think, very wise not to get involved with internal Orthodox Church politics, and actually was much more conciliatory toward the real church in Ukraine after he took office. But now, after the most recent visit by Patriarch Bartholomew, it looks like he's going to start turning the heat up again on the church situation. Again, Zelensky, I don't think is a free man either. He's kind of like Trump in a way that he's the nominal president, but he really doesn't run anything.
Interesting. I mean, he kind of ran on a Trumpian platform in a sense, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Servant, of course, he was a comedian at a television show. Again, it's like Trump in that regard. You know, he was a reality show guy, right? And he ran on a conciliatory platform about ending the war in the East, about ending the corruption. Of course, that's a perennial thing in Ukraine. You know, we're going to end the corruption. You know, they say the corruption in Ukraine would make a Nigerian prince blush. You know, but it's pretty bad. And of course, it hasn't gotten better under Zelensky. And I don't think through lack of trying. And I think it's partly because, like Trump, he simply does not control the apparatus of his own government. That there is not only is there a comparable deep state in Ukraine to the one we have in the United States, in many ways, it's the same deep state. It's the same international operation of bureaucrats, agencies, and their associated think tanks and NGOs and all the Soros-supported groups and all the rest of that.
Interesting. Everyone needs to move to my trad state in West Virginia, and then once we get organized, we're going to annex Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and
don't forget the western counties of Maryland and the middle of Pennsylvania.
Of course.
In fact, while we're going, go all the way up to most of New York State.
you know, but we're not going to really have to annex anyone because all of the red counties are just going to join our union. So we're going to fragment county by county. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on foreign policy things that we didn't cover that we might see from Biden? A couple of things. One is I hope that we're seeing a cooling down of the Armenia-Azerbaijan war now. That there was obviously the Russians were presented with a very delicate situation with the Azeri attack on Armenia and the Armenian exclave Artsakh. And the Russians did not want to intervene directly militarily, but the shoot down of a helicopter by I believe probably Turkish forces from Azerbaijan, but over Armenian territory, gave them the excuse they needed to not intervene militarily, but to intervene politically, to basically threaten the Turks, the Azeris, and the Armenians, say, this is the deal, this is what we're going to do. There'll be Russian peacekeepers inserted. We will now take control of this situation. And that seems to have been successful. It may not necessarily have been the best outcome, but what it does is preserves Russian strategic hegemony within the Transcaucasian region. All the areas that were formerly part of the Soviet Union, before that of the Russian Empire, limit Turkish influence and sort of keep both, the Armenians are on a leash anyway, but also keep the Azeris on a leash. It also, I think, makes
Georgia a little less troublesome for Moscow and the region. So hopefully that's going to calm down a bit and limit the ability, if there is a Biden administration, limit their ability to fish in troubled waters there. My bigger fear is that they will actually try to turn up the heat again in Syria. Is that Trump has been unable to extricate American forces from Syria. I think we just have a few Americans who were killed there a few days ago. I forget what the incident was, but I think many Americans would be surprised. Why do we have people in Syria? But we still do. And I think that they will try to go back to stage one of their playbook, which is Assad must go if they come into office. You'll have, I think, one of the most dangerous people you're likely to have in administration is Samantha Power, the so-called genocide chick. This is the one who cut her teeth in Bosnia, spinning the stories along with Christian Amanpour about genocide in Bosnia and then later on in Kosovo in favor of U.S. and NATO aggression against Serbia. And they're going to want to turn up the heat there as well. I just don't trust these people at all. I just think their impulses are the worst imaginable. And then the other question is what happens with Iran. Like I said, I don't think we'll go back to the Iran nuclear deal, but I think there will be a lot of pressure from both the Israelis and the Saudis and the Emiratis to go back to square one, which is the regime change in Tehran.
Yay. Regime change. Yay. It's our favorite thing. Our favorite thing. But, Trump did block Benjamin Netanyahu, and he unfollowed him and AIPAC on Twitter. So there's some white pills. So he unfollowed AIPAC. So maybe if he wins, maybe if we pull this off and we all show up to this march and just, secure the White House for Trump, maybe this is the true America First administration for the second term. Maybe it is.
You young guys.
You cannot squeeze the hope out of me, Jim. You can't.
Look, I'm actually very hopeful. Like I said, I think 25% chance he does pull this out. And I think if he does pull it out and we have another 4 years, he actually could do better than he did during his first term, because sometimes things happen in politics that nobody expected. And maybe we'll get lucky somehow. Maybe God will not judge us as we deserve.
That's true. But you know what? If it all goes to hell and I end up dying or going to the gulag, I can say that I at least had a chance to eat Jim Jatras's Greek salad, which is the best. I've had a chance to partake of the Greek salad from Jim Jatras.
Well, thank you very much.
So I don't know if I don't remember if I don't let him squeeze the hope out of SIsco. It'll never happen. I will always be optimistic, Michael. So, but I think
I know it doesn't sound like it, Mike, but I really am an optimist. I just actually it was somebody else. Oh, I know it was. Somebody was quoting Admiral Stockdale. Remember the guy who was Ross Perot's running mate? And he was one of the guys in the Hanoi Hilton with John McCain and the rest of the guys back in the old days. And he apparently came up with a credo that had something to the effect that always have confidence and faith in the final victory, but never let that confidence and faith dim your perception of the realities. Look at them for what they are in all their negative consequences as realistically as you can, and don't kid yourself. And the best way to get from A to B, if you have that optimism, is to focus. Don't kid yourselves that things are better than they are just because you're optimistic. Be optimistic, but deal with the realities that they come, and a lot of those realities are very sobering.
Yeah, and Brian Frakes, yes, Trump ain't the hill to die on, but at the moment he seems like the only thing between us and total ruin. So
I agree. It's not so much. Let's put it this way. Just as I think for a lot of the people who are trying to remove Trump, orange man bad, they just hate him. But it's more than that. It's because he was an obstacle to the transformation of America into a post-national, post-racial, post-linguistic, post-sexual, post-Christian, post-whatever it is, nihilist state that they want us to become, this ersatz fake America that they want to build. it's preventing that America from taking full power and what that would mean for us. Why preserving Trump at least, the biblical phrase about the katachon, the he that letteth shall letly be taken out of the way. That is to say that godly rule will remain until it is taken out of the way, and then we get the reign of Antichrist. Now that's in the ultimate sense, and a lot of people, by the way, have associated that with Christian monarchy, the removal of Nicholas II, and so forth. And just as there are many antichrists, I think there are many katachons, there are many with restrainers, many withholders of the deluge of iniquity that is to come. And to the extent to which Trump, as obviously a very flawed vessel, both politically and personally, is a restrainer against the deluge of evil that we're facing, then you've got to, I think, bolster that wall for whatever it's worth. And if it falls, hopefully there's another wall somewhere. But you don't cede, if you can help it, territory to the forces of, let's be honest, this demonic, satanic forces of destruction. I think it was Enoch Powell in the United Kingdom who said, politics is the art of avoiding avoidable evils. We don't trust not in princes. We don't trust in princes. We don't trust in Trump. But we hope that Trump at least could be somebody who helps us avoid avoidable evils that are all too apparent in the windshield ahead if he were to go.
I agree with that assessment. I mean, I'm way to Trump's right, and I would prefer to have somebody also way to his right. But
and by the way, I know there are some people who what they call accelerationists. A lot of these have a racial view of things. Who say, well, if Trump goes, that'll be great because then people have to get red pilled, wake up and smell the coffee and see blah blah blah, and they'll all join the movement.
How'd that work in Russia?
Well, that's the other thing is whenever a revolutionary regime actually manages to take power, it's very hard to get them out. And you look at the French Revolution, the Spanish Republic, the Russian Revolution. What was the other one? The Mexican Revolution. There were popular movements, Christian popular movements in all those countries to oppose them. The only one that won was Spain, and that's only because he had very strong outside allies. If the woke revolution takes power, I don't even expect, some people say, well, then there'll be a civil war or Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah. I don't expect it. And I don't necessarily want it, but I also don't expect it because I think most people are we have this notion that the American people are strong and freedom loving and brave, and it's only our leaders who are corrupt. No, there's a lot of corruption in the people too, and there's a lot of weakness in the people. Just see how strong people are when they're thinking about not getting a paycheck, not being able to let their kid go to school, not being able to shop at stores, not being able to have a bank account, not being, because you said the wrong thing on social media or something, right? Or you said the wrong thing to somebody in what you thought was a private conversation, but it turned out you were being, racially, ethnically, sexually insensitive in some way. So that's the kind of future we're facing. How many Americans are really going to stand up under that and say, well, then I won't stand for it. I've got my guns. Well, what are you going to do? Who are you going to shoot? I mean, that was a line. What was that from Grapes of Wrath? Was it? Well, then if they come here and try to take my house, I'll shoot them. Well, why'd you do that? I mean, the guy's just working for the bank. It's not, the sheriff's not his job. I mean, he's just doing what the court's ordering him to do. Well, now I'll go shoot the court. Well, the court's just fighting what the law says because the bank is foreclosing on the property. Well, I'll go shoot the bank. Well, the bank is not, it's not their decision. They're just reporting to some guy in New York. And then he says, well, then who do I shoot? So, I mean, this idea that there's going to be a popular revolt with weapons if the wokesters take over, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Well, there is a, more importantly, we have to address this. Somebody's calling me a Mexican American and saying my last name is.
You're Italian, aren't you?
No, actually,
you're is Slovak, right?
No, I'm 50% English. Like 20 something Scots Irish, and then like 16% German, 7% Slavic, and the last name is actually a misspelled Slavic name. So somehow, even though I barely have any Slavic in me, the Slavic surname was what was passed down, and it was misspelled when my grandparents came to America, or great grandparents came here. They spelled it wrong, and half of my grandfather's, his brother's side spells it completely different than we spell it. So, it's not actually.
What kind of Slavic is it?
From Slovakia, actually.
Well, I said Slovak.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you
Yeah.
said I thought you said Polak. I was
No,
like,
Slovak. And
Yeah.
by the way, Scots Irish are really English too.
That's true. So I'm mostly just English.
Yeah, exactly.
English.
Well, like an American, like God intended Americans to be.
Exactly. And English actually descends from English, which is the angelic language. So it's what they speak in heaven.
That's not true.
Totally true. Totally.
Who was the Pope who sent Saint Augustine of Canterbury there? Because he thought Siskovich, he thought that the Anglo slaves he saw in the slave market looked like angels, and that they should not be heathens.
Oh wow. Let's make Latinos Orthodox again. Yeah,
it's happening. There are some, quite a few.
I am in a Maramud.
Heinz 57. There you go.
So, well, it is what it is. 100%.
I'm not a mud. I'm pure-blooded Spartan.
100% European, though. So
100% Europe. Actually, I don't know. Have you taken one of those tests?
I did. I have ancestry DNA. No,
but they're all European, huh?
Yep. I was proud of that when I saw no sub-Saharan African, no savage American. I mean Native American. Sorry. No hook nose overlord.
Oh, come on now.
Just kidding.
Yes.
Anyways, I think that's all I have. Did I ask you for a book suggestion last time you were on?
No, I wish you'd told me before, and I would have thought I would have. Oh yes, I do have a book suggestion.
Shoot it out.
It's called A Gentleman in Moscow. If you hang on 1 second, I'll give you the author's name. It's actually, let me say something bad about it. Oprah recommends it. Amor Towles, AMORTOWLES. Like I said, Oprah recommends it. Despite that, apparently they're going to make a mini series out of it, which makes me sick to think of it, because I'm sure they'll make a mess of it. But it is an absolutely delightful book. I mean, as I read the book, I forced myself to read less of it at a time than I wanted to, because I didn't want it to end. And it showed such a depth of knowledge about immediate post-revolutionary Russia. The guy obviously knows his Solzhenitsyn, even though evidently the author's quite a liberal. And it's just a delightful book, a very insightful book. And what's the other thing about it? There's one plot twist, a very important plot twist I did not like, but it's just I can't recommend it highly enough. It just like I said, and the language is that his use of language is among the best writing I've ever seen anywhere at all.
Well, I appreciate the recommendation, and thank you for coming on, and I hope to get a chance to watch you later on Jay Dyer's show. So, well, everyone has a full schedule to watch. At 7:00 is Orthodoxy First with Luke.
Oh yes, with Luke.
With Luke Kindrat. So go watch his show, and then go watch Jay Dyer and watch Jim again for the second time in one night. So appreciate it. Sunday I have coming on Frank from Let's Be Frank. So he's a based Mexican guy. So we were talking about Mexicans and bringing a real Mexican on Sunday, and he's going to the march as well. So maybe we'll just talk about the march on Saturday. So anyways,
won't there be a wall to keep him out of the march?
Well, we're gonna keep Frank, because Frank is he has his citizenship. He's been a loyal. He's pretty based. Even his content's pretty normal, but I see the statuses that he likes on Twitter. So I don't want to throw him under the bus too much, but
you're such a lib.
But anyways, thanks for coming on, Jim.
Okay,
thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in DC on Saturday.
Aye, aye, sir. Onward, upward.